Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Full Council. Today, Thursday, the 26th of February. Item 1 on our agenda are declarations of interest. Do I have any, please? No, thank you. Item 2 are minutes of our previous meeting held on the 27th of January. Are there any issues or anything relating to those minutes, please? Then could I have a proposer? Thank you. Councillor Mumford, seconded. Councillor Marcus. All those in favour? It's carried, unanimous. Thank you. Item 3 on our agenda are chairman's announcements. I would just like to say, on behalf of all of us, to pass on our sincere condolences to our colleague, Councillor Robert Dorian Smith, on the very sad loss of his wife. So we wish him and his family every best wish at this time. Thank you. I would also like to just remind everybody that we have our budget consultation this evening at 5 o'clock in here. So would welcome as many of you as possible. Thank you very much. Item 4 on our agenda, a consideration of any questions received under Standing Order 14. I have none. Item 5 is to consider any motions received in accordance with Standing Order 12. I have none. Item 6 is to receive draft minutes from committees for information only. And we have various meetings that have been had that we have draft minutes from. Item 7, urgent items, I have none. And we move on now to part 1, item 8 on our agenda, which is our planning application in the hands of Lisa, our Chief Planning Officer. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. So this planning application is a householder application for minor external works that is brought to you for a decision today on the basis that it is a council-owned property, not because of any planning concerns or objections. Proposal is limited to replacing deteriorated fascia and soffit boards with the new UPVC alternatives and replacing existing UPVC rainwater goods. The works are restricted to the roofline and do not change the scale, form or use of the building. So as you are aware, and as it's stated in the report, the property lies within the conservation area, the AONB, so the works must preserve the local character and meet statutory duties under Section 72 and Section 245. The replacement materials will improve uniformity along the roofline and will result in no harm to the conservation area or nearby listed buildings. The applicant has undertaken a preliminary roost assessment and confirms negligible back roosting potential with a low residual risk for managing this through precautionary method of works secured by condition. There've been no representations and no consultations were required due to the modest nature of the proposal. Residential amenity will not be affected through the construction hours condition, and it's considered that could manage the short-term disturbance. And the project is overall considered to comply with the local plan. And the recommendation is to grant the application subject to the conditions set out in Appendix A. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Councillor Marcus, please.
Yeah, it's a pretty straightforward proposal, so I would propose recommendations.
Thank you. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Peacock. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Thank you very much. Item 9 on our agenda is the local plan 2026 to 2041, the project initiation document, also in the hands of Lisa. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Chair. So this report brings forward the next steps in preparing the new local plan for the Isles of Scilly. Members will recall that in July last year, you approved the commencement of a review of the adopted local plan and the adoption of a new local plan timetable. The wording of that decision was intentionally broad and it didn't specify a partial or a full review at that time. What it did set out very clearly is that we would begin the work required under the new national plan making system. Since that point, the National Planning Policy Framework has continued to change at pace, including an implementation of the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act. the move to the new 30-month local plan process, and a shift to a revised national planning policy framework and national development management policies, which are currently under consultation until March at the moment. And this shift to a revised national planning, These changes mean that producing a new local plan to replace the 2015-2030 plan will be a legal and practical necessity. Our existing plan reaches its 5-year review point in March. Government guidance is clear that plans must be reviewed within 5 years and kept up to date. The transitional arrangements issued by the government state that because no new plan has been progressed since the adoption of the 2021 Isles of Scilly local plan, we must now prepare a new local plan under the revised framework. So today's report therefore seeks to move us from preparatory work to the structured plan making process. It sets out the scope of the local plan review, the evidence base that will be required, and the updated local plan timetable that members are asked to approve today. There is a significant but essential undertaking for the Council. A new local plan will allow us to plan proactively for housing, the economy, transport, climate resilience, renewable energy, and the protection of our natural and historic environment, ensuring that our development plan reflects both the island's needs and national policy expectations. And I'll pause there for questions from members. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Marcus, please.
Yeah, no, it's good to see all of the upcoming work in one document. The only question I think, and other members as well would have, is just about budget and the grant available to us. When do we get to hear whether we're successful with that?
So your question is, repeat the question.
The question is about, the question is just about funding.
Yeah.
And there's a grant available to us, which has been applied. There is a grant available to us, which has been applied for.
Yes.
When do we hear about whether we're successful?
So we have put in an expression of interest for a share of the £40 million pot of money that the government has announced for supporting local authorities for local plan making processes. So we've put in that expression of interest. We meet all the qualifying criteria. We've sent them this project initiation document because we have to demonstrate how we would spend the money, by when, that we will meet all the criteria. If we're not successful, the work would have to be scaled back. So we're ensuring we do all the statutory minimum requirements. So the housing economic needs assessment has been done. We're looking at doing a landscape character because that was a requirement from the outcome of the last local plan. We understand recreational pressure from development. And we are looking at doing the strategic flood risk assessment very shortly. So these are critical things that we need to have done, and we cannot not do a local plan. So we have to carry on, but we have to scale it back. And looking at the budget, I've just written some notes, which I'm just going to have a look at. So we would not, for example, look to do the online consultation tool. So I've budgeted in there, I think £30,000 to do the improved digital consultation. That's not a statutory requirement. The government, it's very clear that the government wants us to improve that front-loading process, engage with our communities better. We think having a better website and a better way, maps and things where people can comment more easily, engage in the process better, would be really beneficial for this local plan. So we wouldn't do that if we didn't have the budget. So there are things in there that we don't essentially have to do, but we think the budget can still work if we're not successful, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Thank you. Nicola, did you want to come in?
It's just to say the timescales for that government decision. We're expecting a decision by the end of March, so hope we'll be better able to scale back or improve our evidence-based collection once we know whether that budget's secured or not. But we're hoping to hear before the end of March.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Nixon, please.
Thank you. In paragraph 6 of your report, you put the PID identifies total projected local plan costs of approximately £245,000, but on the first page of the PID, it actually says 265,000. Is one of those a typo? Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. And then also in paragraph 6, obviously you've just said that we'd move the scope back, but it does say in paragraph 6, without the funding, additional internal or alternative sources may be required to deliver the plan. Have we identified what those additional sources might need to be? So yes, you've stated without the government funding, additional internal or alternative sources may be required to deliver the plan. Have we identified what those alternative sources might need to be? Thank you.
No, sorry, I haven't.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Blackwell, please.
Thank you. So just following on from that first question, if the funds are not forthcoming from the MHCLG, can we complete the statutory requirements in the statutory timescale relating to this document for the confirmed available £110,000?
Can you say that again?
Yeah,
Really
of course. Sorry. If the funds are not forthcoming from the MHCLG, can we complete the statutory requirements relating to this document within the statutory timeframe for the confirmed available £110,000?
I think we can, yeah. So I've been looking at the budget and looking at what is essential. The budget is based on the upper end of all the costs that we've looked at, and there's a good chance that some of the work is not necessary, some of the work will not cost as much as that, and there are projects like the surface water drainage study that the environment team are currently doing, looking at the consultants who are doing that to look at the strategic flood risk assessment work to see if there are cost benefits to be made by using that consultant who's already doing work for us, and picking up on the findings of that work to inform the strategic flood risk assessment. But so I do think that the timetable and the essential statutory pieces of work we need to do, we can do if we're not successful with that government money.
Good news, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Peacock, please.
Yeah, you've picked up on the bit, Lisa, that I was about to comment on, which is knowing that strategic flood risk is being done elsewhere, can we leverage in that to reduce costs? That would be my question. But I think Lynn's, you've already picked up with Lynn anyway. Yeah, sure. So apologies. Yeah, I was saying that basically the strategic flood plan we know is being done, as you say, by environment. And I'm just wondering whether some of that data will feed straight into here without requirement for any additional work from you.
Yeah, quite possibly that we may not need to do that, because the document identifies, this is at the suggestion of the Environment Agency, a water cycle study. That is a very expensive piece of work from what I can gather. It's not a statutory requirement, so I don't think we need to do that. But the data is already available. The Cornwall Council have done in terms of mapping coastal vulnerability zones and understanding flood risk better. So there is definitely work that has already been done that can reduce the cost of kind of delivering on that understanding of strategic flood risk issues and how they feed into the delivery of the local plan, and matching in with the heritage risks and the housing needs that we've identified that we need to build. So all of these things sort of filter in.
Yeah.
Does that answer the question?
It does, yes. And
Sorry.
my final question would be 1.6 on your page 10 of your agenda pack. Talks about the design guide and the biodiversity and geodiversity guides. They're all sort of quite old documents now. Looking, design guides 2007 is quite a long time ago. Are we looking to update those documents at some point in the future?
Yes, definitely. They are definitely documents that do need updating. They are like you say, 2007. Yeah, they look at the habitat at that point in time, the biodiversity at that point in time. They don't reflect the biodiversity net gains and the Environment Act agenda, you know, the agenda of increasing biodiversity and habitat. So they will need doing at some point in time.
That was my point.
Thank you very much. Before we go to the vote, Councillor Legg, I just need to ask you whether you have any declarations of interest.
I have none.
Thank you very much. Councillor Roger?
Just, I don't know if you noticed Appendix B, last page of the document, there's some errors there with regards to community halls. It says Briar Community Hall, Middletown, St Martin's. No, the Briar quotes St Martin's, and St Martin's has got the Briar postcode.
Okay.
Sorry, just on the last page. Just prove I read it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. We have 4 recommendations for this paper. Do I have a proposer, please? Councillor Marcus, seconder. Councillor White. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lisa. Right, we move on now to item 10 on our agenda, which is the third quarter financial performance report for 25-26, and that's in the hands of our Chief Executive 151 Officer Russell. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The report in front of you today, members, sets out the Q3 financial position with a forecast of the likely outturn at year end. Unfortunately, I have to report back that since Q2, the overspend has increased in terms of the forecast at year end by £345,000. This means that we are now forecasting an overspend of £1.194 million, which is a very significant sum. The main reasons for the increase since the Q2 report are that there's been further increases in costs in adult services, although we've had a partial offset by using the last part of the contingency, plus the risk that we outlined in the previous report around potential challenge on children's services funding from the DFE main as a city education grant, about it fully funding both early years and SEND provision. Unfortunately, that risk came to fruition and we did not receive as much funding in that final grant settlement as we had hoped for. So that builds increasing pressure into the budget going forward, and for this year and for future years. Now, in terms of what the Council is doing about this significant overspend, give members assurance that we are not taking it lightly. We have a plan in place that we are looking at key lines of inquiry, in particular in adults. We are looking at how we can reduce agency spend. Now, to give some assurance that since we wrote this report, at the point of writing this report, I think we actually had 10 agency staff in that service, primarily around running the care home. I understand as of this week, I think we are now down to 5, so you can see that we are moving in the right direction. Part of that is bringing some of those staff onto full-time council contracts. The others is changing the rotas and how we actually operate. So we are reducing our need for agency staff, which will help to see take some of the pressure off. In terms of interim staff, we've made several permanent recruitment positions, done this in the last couple of months as well. Again, although we won't see a massive change or switch in the funding during the last 5 or 6 weeks of this year, it will see the trend reduce of what we're spending on interims. So again, moving in the right direction. The other areas that I need looking at, and they are set out, I should have said they are set out in Appendix B of the report, we are looking at the financial assessments for people that are in receipt of services within the adult care. We are working through the LGA and the Institute the National Institute of Financial Assessors to get a third party to do a piece of work to assess all our cases, to bring them up to date and do a robust job. We're working with potentially 2 local authorities who are interested in doing that, and we're going through the process of working out which one is probably the best one to commission, bearing in mind both cost and all the difficulties of data sharing, etc., which we will have to put in place. But I can give members assurance that that work will be done fairly soon. That should at least give us a base figure and a base position of what level of financial contributions we should be trying to recover. In addition to that, the fees and charges will be reviewed as part of the report that's going to full council early March. As I've pointed out, I think in previous reports, having looked at our fees and charges and looked at them in comparison to what our costs are and what the cost of the similar services are on the mainland, and bearing in mind our cost base is probably higher, it does look as if our fees and charges is not set at a level that we recover full cost by a significant sum. So that will be form part of a piece of work on fees and charges that will be coming to the meeting in March alongside the budget report. There is also requirements to review all the care assessments to ensure that they are fit for purpose, and again that piece of work is underway. It is interesting that in the 2014 Act covering adult social care, there was very clear definitions of what we should be doing in terms of setting the criteria for the front door. It doesn't look as if we've really got that robustly in place, and we'll need to revisit that and make sure that we know what our criteria is for allowing for intervention in terms of the care requirements for people who request it. Most councils, you can have 3 levels. You have low, medium and high. The level of funding that the government currently offer to most councils is will only really cover high level care needs. So we will need to take that on board and think how we handle that going forward. Most councils, in fact I would say nearly every council in the country, has moved to a criteria of only interventions where the care need is high at the moment, and we'll probably need to follow suit on that. Again, that will need a further report when we set those criteria, but those pieces of work are underway, so it's not as if we've got an overspend and we're not doing anything. There's a whole series of pieces of work which are in progress. They're moving at speed in some places, and I'm hopeful that they will start to turn the tide in terms of the trend and the level of spend that we've currently got. It's going to be a difficult period. It will take time for some of the costs to start reducing and the trends to start reducing, but work is underway, and we have prioritised it in terms of corporate resources moving forward. That's a position really with the overspend. If we, at the moment, obviously, we will have to fund that overspend. We can't just sit there as unfunded. This report suggests that we would draw on our general fund reserve and recommends doing so. This would obviously reduce our general fund reserve down to a level which I think would be an issue going forward, both in setting next year's budget, and our external auditors will take a view that they probably will feel that it is at a level that is less than we require to have the robust financial viability going forward. On that basis, that we are in discussions with the government currently about an exceptional funding solution, and the current overspend is being brought into those conversations as well. So it may well be that we have a different method of funding it, but at the moment it will come from the reserves, and hopefully we can either replenish the reserves or use an alternative method of funding. If we have to fund it from reserves, I do have to point out our level of reserves will be at a level which will be difficult to sustain and support a council going forward in its budget priorities for next year. Moving on through the report, a lot of it is just regular reporting and nothing I really need to bring it to your attention. Probably the one area which I've mentioned previously that I do need to comment on is that is having an impact on future year financial planning is that we are beginning to see a slight struggle in collecting both council tax and business rates. That's set out in the report. We've pretty much kept to the target levels that we set ourselves over the last 2 or 3 years, but I think we are now beginning to see a slight drift off. The council tax, I think, is predominantly down to second homes. There was an estimate built into the numbers at the beginning of the year about the number of homes that would incur the second homes premium, and obviously that has reduced by about 20 properties during the year as people have challenged that definition. So that will put a strain on the collection rate and the strain on the collection fund. Business rates, similarly, there is a reduction in the level of collection, and some of that is due to the again challenges on valuation levels, etc. Valuation challenges don't come through us; they go to HMRC. HMRC, as we know, are backlog, so all of a sudden, every now and again, we get a couple of valuations go through where they're successful and they're backdated. Again, that has a negative impact on our position going forward in terms of the collection fund. The other area probably worth mentioning is that our level of arrears on housing rents is at a level which is significantly higher than what we would normally expect. Again, work is underway through our housing team to analyse that and address it. I'm hopeful that the Q4 figures will start to see that reducing, but it will, again, as with the adult situation, take time. It isn't something that we can flick a switch overnight and it will be resolved instantly. It will take a period of time for those backlogs of rent to be collected, but hopefully we see the trend moving in the right direction. That's the positive indicator that I'm looking for at the moment. I think I will leave it at that, Chair. The rest of the report, I think, is members have read, and if they have any questions, more than willing to try and answer them.
Thank you very much. Councillor Nixon, please.
Thank you. Well, it's good to see that we are limping towards the right direction in some of these areas. I'm concerned about the government pulling the rug out from under us with the DFE, now saying they're not going to deliver the statutory funding for early years and SEND provision. I just want to check, do we have any other avenues to pursue on that item in particular?
Yeah, we are working with the DFE on how the funding for what they call our educational side of our services works, which is the area that will cover this. I think, as with a great deal of interaction that we currently have with the government, we are beginning to see a tightening of the rules and the regulations around how they deal with this council in particular, and we need to address our position accordingly. So, you know, there has been, and I think one of the reasons that we have requested, you know, numerous times to government is to have a single funding pot for the whole council, is that we have pockets of funding from various government departments. They have an element of flexibility of dealing with the islands in a little bit of a flexible nature. As we move through the evolution of central government, it seems that that flexibility is becoming less, and they're treating us more in line with the national frameworks. We need to actually, you know, reset ourselves on the same basis and ensure that we have the data that supports that, and that we can challenge them over the level of funding that they are promising us.
Thank you. The other point I wanted to make, well, it's positive that you've said about looking into rent recovery, analysing how we can do better on that. We're still falling behind on our payments to local SMEs. Again, in the report, it mentions the fact that people aren't raising orders correctly. I just want to make sure if we've got a plan in place to try and close that loophole.
Yes, we have. We've had discussions with the payments team, and they have agreed a change in the processes and try and help improve that. There will be a series of training that will be needed. We've identified some training requirements which we are putting in place now, and hopefully working with colleagues in Cornwall and the payments team, we'll start to get the right processes in place to improve the payment performance. Overall, our total payment performance on a statutory basis, you've got to remember, is that we have to pay all our suppliers in 30 days. The decision to have a more stretch target for SMEs is our own decision. I think it's the right one, but we are struggling to meet the targets we've set ourselves.
Thank you. I would also just like to propose all the items on here.
Thank you. Councillor Sims, please.
Well, I'm happy to second it as well. I've got a couple of questions. The second homes council tax uplift, now that is optional for councils, isn't it? I mean, there's lots of councils in the country, places that are not particularly nice, that are not going to have any second homes. They're not going to bother to put it in. And so on that basis, if you have a second home over here and you live somewhere which doesn't do the second home uplift, it's much easier to say, this is my primary home and that's the second home. So, you know, the golden goose turns out to be a gander in a way, because it's so easy to get up. So that was just wanted to get that off my chest. And just the other thing is the airport numbers. I note that we've actually more or less got it right this year in terms of the airport revenue, which is useful. But because you're looking at the graph here, then the forecast numbers are again about 15–16% in excess of the actual numbers. So I'm just sort of pleased that we eventually, after a number of years, we seem to have compensated for the fact properly that the forecast numbers are bigger than the actual, and we sort of got it more or less right this year, which is useful, because this has been a recurrent problem since at least 2013.
Yeah, as you'll see that our passenger numbers are not that different from the forecast. Actually, our total revenue at the airport is slightly up this year. There's been slightly more landings, and there's more general aviation activity than there has been for a couple of years. There's also been a significant uplift in the amount of freight coming through. Obviously, the downside for the islanders has been the problems with freight over the last 2 or 3 months. The upside is a lot of it's coming through the airport, so there is a benefit to it purely from with an airport hat on.
Thank you. Councillor Blackwell, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. I've got 2 questions and a comment. Firstly, on page 91, paragraph 4.2, could you explain on 4.2 what drove the reprofiling and was it significant?
Yeah, the reprofiling of the expenditure I think you're referring to is of the Museum and Culture Centre project. It's been reprofiled over the 2 years, so there was an estimate of how much would be spent in 2025-26 and how much in 26-27. As we know, the programme is behind, therefore it's been reprofiled to reflect the revised programme of works, which will take the project into the autumn, whereas originally the project was supposed to be completed in the summer. So the reprofiling reflects what's actually happened on the ground.
Thank you. And on page 92, point 5.1, what and how much is the compensation event for the museum?
I will ask Nicola, knows the detail of this, if she could come in, whether we have that detail or whether it...
Yeah, so there isn't a compensation event. The process that we go through the NEC contract is compensation events arise through the program. So it's not like a JCT contract where you have a compensation event at the end and you try and tally it all up as a single entity. So there are continuous requests for change to the project from the applicant, from the contractor. The contractor says, this is your fault, you need to pay us this much. We go back and say, no, we think this relates to another issue. So there's no fixed fee at the moment about what that will be, because it will continue to the end of the programme. So compensation events will occur right the way through to the end of the programme. And that's why we have contingency in the budget to compensate ourselves for those changes. Unforeseen things like Storm Goretti will result in compensation events around delays to staffing or freight coming to the island. So that it will continue to the end of the project, but we try and resolve them as we move through the project and use contingency to cover those costs.
Okay, thank you. And just lastly, obviously currently we're on a financial tightrope with only 1 month buffer in reserve. As councillors, we have a legal liability and can be held liable for council's actions. We have a duty of care regarding agreeing the annual return, so should understand and be aware of any variations or additions we are agreeing to. For this reason, I cannot support recommendation 3 and request recommendations are taken individually. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Councillor White was actually been trying to get in and couldn't get your light on. Are you? Thank you. Bring you next. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, obviously there's a lot in here today, and some of the points have been covered by other members. I do want to raise a concern I have, obviously, regarding the settlement from the DFE for early years funding and SEND provision. That obviously puts us in a very difficult position, and I'm concerned that we don't pass that pain down to childcare providers on the island. I became aware this morning that childcare providers across the islands received a letter from the council yesterday saying that the amount of funding they would receive per child for the statutory funding would not go up in line with inflation, and that actually for those operators that would put them into a situation where they're not covering their costs. Now, I know they're going to make representations about that to our budgeting consultation this afternoon, this evening, but yeah, I know we all realise how catastrophic it would be for the islands if our childcare providers had to close. So I just want to make sure we're doing our best to ensure that we keep childcare open on the islands, because if they can't make their costs and they can't cover their wages and the freight bills, and they have to meet inflation, so they're already not running huge profit margins, so it causes a great deal of concern for me there. And on the sort of subject of the museum funding, I chaired the project board meeting yesterday, and I did make it clear that there wouldn't be further funding coming from the council because of our sort of upcoming financial situation. So I did make that clear that there was not further recourse to us for funds for the museum project as well. Thank you.
Probably could make a brief comment, although it's looking at next year's funding. In terms of the early years funding, we will be working, trying to get further funding from DFE. That is a key part of our strategy next year. But in terms of the uplift, I will need to go away and talk to the service, because there will be a small inflationary uplift. I think the request that came through was for an uplift over and above the minimum uplift that is suggested by the government. So it was asking for an uplift greater than the normal level of inflation. I think maybe a slight confusion in the actual way that's been communicated, but there will be the normal inflationary uplift of around 3%. But I think the request for us for a more significant uplift.
I think that's probably because rates here, due to the way we're funded, are lower than elsewhere in the country. That's probably why they were looking for a further increase. But I think that's not how that's been communicated to them. And actually, if it does put them in that difficult financial situation, perhaps we can work with the childcare providers to make the case to the DFE for that additional funding. Because we can't imperil that on the islands. It's so important to the economy and to the community here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Peacock, please.
Just a note for the chair first, I no longer need to leave the chamber, so I will be here until the end of the meeting.
Okay.
My meeting's been cancelled, but moving on. Couple of points. I think, obviously, I share Councillor White's and Councillor Blackwell's comments around SEND. That's obviously quite disturbing for us to suddenly know that, yet again, we've been frozen out of a central government funding pot because, for whatever reason, we're not in the scheme. It's alarming, but yeah, I think you've given a reasonable response to that. In terms of the airport, and I think this is a factor that we've spoken to Councillor Sims about before, we know that we may be seeing a reduction in passenger numbers next year if the proposed vessel that Steamship Company are talking about comes online. I presume moving forward we will be seeing some form of forecast around that, because obviously you'd expect a reduction through our airport, which obviously needs to feed into the figures. And finally, on council tax, obviously that's, as you said, it's a downward trend. At what point, and can you explain to the council how debt recovery comes in? You know, does it get to the extent of us sending the bailiffs in? I don't want to go down that line, but we are in from my way of sitting here, we're in a really, really precarious situation as a council, and I think, you know, do we need to revise our policies around debt collection? Do we need to sell that debt on to a debt collection agency, etc., etc.? And how does that normally work? In the private sector, you'd sell it on to a debt collection agency and forget about it and wait for the money to come in. But obviously, I'm not sure how that would work in the public sector.
In terms of answering on the collection of council tax debt, there is a very clear process in place which ensures that, first of all, we try and work with people who are in arrears, so working with them, not doing anything on to them. So it's to try and work with them to find a solution. We do have our hardship budget, which will help and can help in the short term. So our first priority is to work with them to find a solution. That's what the team do. If that doesn't create the right outcome, then we do go through the process, and the process is clearly set out of taking it to a magistrate's court and getting charging orders in place, etc. And then there's the implementation of those charging orders. I'm not sure we've been in a position as of yet where we've needed to use bailiffs, and we would have to be very careful about the implications of doing so, I would suggest. So the team are very aware of that, and we do everything we can not to get to that level of debt collection at the moment.
I wasn't recommending we send the bailiffs in. It was just a question, but it's useful to know, I think, for the councillors how the mechanism works, and you know, especially if people are in financial stress, it's good to know that the team will reach out to them and try and find a solution.
Thank you. Councillor Mumford, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say that the improvement plan for Park House is slow but sure, and it's nice to see the agency staff go down. Just one thing, Russell, the water rates accounts, it does say at the end here that if this isn't paid, they'll be written off during Q4. What are we doing to try and get that money in?
Well, we've been working with the team on it for the last 6 years. I think we started with a figure literally just under the 100,000 mark. We're down to 20,000. So we have collected a significant proportion. We are now down into what I call the stuff that is probably not collectible. We are now 6 years past from when we were a water authority. Most of those debts are probably not going to be collectible now. People have moved on, etc. We have provided in the accounts in previous years, so we have a provision to pay for any write-offs. So there's no direct impact on the bottom line, although any money we can collect would be a small upside. But I think the ability to collect it now, this far from the original source of the debt, is going to be extremely difficult. I think, as mentioned previously, it's worth mentioning that unfortunately we handed over the, well, fortunately for some reasons, we handed over the service to South West Water, I think it was April 2020. You can also work out what else happened in March 2020, which was the COVID pandemic. So the first 2 years of we weren't allowed to collect this debt. There was rules set by the government that prevented us from collecting this debt for 2 years. So we were slightly on the back foot to start with, because anybody who's involved in debt collection, the one key thing is to try and collect it quickly. As soon as you get that time delay, you're always going to struggle. So I know we're 4 years away from COVID now, but yeah, I think some of that residual is down to not being able to do the debt collecting immediately after handing the service over.
It's a pity that the government don't pay up what we couldn't collect.
Thank you. Vice Chair Joel, please.
Yeah, I was just going to share my concerns that Councillor White and others have raised around the DFE settlement. There's been a flurry of communication between myself, parents and providers overnight regarding some anxiety around sustainability of provision. I'm very conscious our next agenda item is going to be touching on vulnerable children. So this just seems to be a funding decision that's going to amplify our risk to having more vulnerable children. I'm conscious around we're going to have an Ofsted inspection around SEND provision imminently. The less resources we have to support that obviously doesn't help our cause. I know Claire is in the room as our DFE advisor today, and I'm sure she's hearing all that's been said. We have Improvement Board next Tuesday, so I'm sure we can again raise it at that forum. And as Councillor White said, I've been sent a statement by the network of providers that I'd like shared at the public meeting this evening. But yeah, I just share the concerns. I think our whole economy is based on having good, affordable, reliable childcare that allow parents to commit to work and for members sometimes to even come and sit in these sorts of meetings. So it seems to be, again, one of those short-sighted decisions where I think we've probably got to improve our communication with DFE to give them the confidence and understanding of what our problems are. And also I think we need to do some work now with some of our providers and parents to reassure them that we're going to do all we can to try and soften that challenge. And the only other point I was going to make was we touched on the Town Hall Museum Cultural Centre. I think it would be helpful if members could have some sort of all-member briefing on just what the next 6 months are going to look like on that project. There's sort of words in the report this morning about concerns on timescales, so it would be good to have a full appraisal on some of those challenges which we face in terms of that project as well, please.
Thank you very much. So we have we've had a proposer and seconder for these recommendations.
Chair.
The fact that one person, one councillor does not wish to vote on one of the items, I intend to take recommendations 1, 2 and 4 together and 3 separately. And I think monitoring officer, is that what you were going to mention?
It was, and sorry for interrupting, Chair. And if you just get confirmation from the proposer and seconder that they're still happy to propose and second 1, 2 and 4, because the debate did continue for a period. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nixon?
Yeah, I'm still happy to propose 1, 2 and 4.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll take, first of all, items, recommendations 1, 2 and 4. All those in favour, please. That's carried unanimous. Thank you very much. Recommendation 3. Councillor Nixon, are you happy still to propose that or not?
I am.
Yes. And seconded, thank you. All those in favour, please, of recommendation 3. That's carried, thank you. And those against? 1. Any abstention? No, thank you. Thank you very much. We move on now to item 11, which is our Alza Silly Corporate Parenting and Vulnerable Children. That's in the hands of Claire Burgess, our advisor from DFE. Thank you, Claire.
Hi. I know most of you, but maybe some of you haven't met me before. So when you had your inspection for children's services and the outcome from Ofsted was inadequate, part of the process through DFE is that you get appointed a DFE advisor. And that's my role here. I'm your DFE advisor for children's social care. My background is around practice and improvement. And I've been supporting you now for 2.5 years, so quite a long time. You're coming towards the end of your period in intervention. You should probably get a re-inspection for children's social care in the autumn, I would think, but we never know. You've had the call last week, so you're having your 5th monitoring visit from Ofsted, not next week, the week after. So part of the challenge when you were inspected, and I think you've touched on this already, both Russell, Chair and Chief Exec, that although you're a small island, you'd still have to be inspected under the same regime. And although you have no children in care currently and haven't had for a while, and therefore no children who are care experienced, or what we sometimes call care leavers, you got inadequate judgments for both those elements because you haven't and hadn't prepared for what would happen if that did happen. So that meant you were inadequate because of those 2 judgments, as well as some other practice issues. So part of the work that's been happening over the last sort of period has been thinking quite strongly around so how do we get around that fact that we don't have any children in care? You may have in the future, but if you do, it's going to be a very small number. And therefore, how do you provide them with the support they need, and also the care leavers if they come onto the island and need support? So a year ago, it came to full council, I think, the proposal of a care ready strategy, so that you could be ready and could demonstrate that you'd done some real thinking around how you would manage those needs of those children. And this is really an update on trying to hopefully get to the point where you practically can evidence some of that. So you've got a strategic approach, but you haven't done anything yet around the practice of that. So that paper that you have, which Kanchan can introduce in a minute, and Joel's been very involved in our discussions, are really to address that. And if you don't have those sorts of things in place when the inspectors come back, then clearly it'll still be inadequate. So it's about being creative on the islands, isn't it, around the statutory requirements that you have alongside any other upper tier local authority in the country, but within your own unique setting. So I would just say that this is a really important piece of work for you. It's really important because you do have statutory duties around corporate parenting and for children care leavers now. Some of you will have met with Mark Riddell. I know some of you were in the room when he came, the government's DFE advisor for care leavers, and he's more than happy to come back and support. So I would just say that this is really, it's about culture. It's not about money or funding, because actually it's about your statutory duties and how you implement that, really. So, Joel, over to you, I think.
Thank you.
Vice Chair, I should call you, sorry.
Call me what you like, Claire. No, I think you've covered off most of the sort of notes I'd scribbled down this morning. I think the main difference for me between what we have now and what we had before us last May is just we're looking at a sort of more broader, slightly more holistic angle, rather than just being totally focused on looked after children and being care ready. The suggestion in the paper today is we embrace some of the work we're doing around young carers and some of that definition of vulnerable children as well, which is quite broad. I don't know how we define that. So we've got in recommendation 1 sort of 2 options. My preference would be for option B. I think we need to move forward at a bit of pace to get this done. I just consider if we do option A straight away, we just take on too much. I think option B gives us a bit more of a framework and a bit more focus, which we can then use things like the Children and Young People's Plan, which we've got coming forward, and the corporate plan in terms of those 2 governance documents to shape. So totally support all the work that's gone on. I'm very keen that the meeting takes place. Again, it seems like one of those things we've spent a huge amount of time talking about, but I'm actually quite keen now to have some conversations and sort of try and hone in on some of the outcomes and preparation we need to do. I'm very keen for the voice of young people again to be part of this. We've got a proposed meeting date for next month. And we've also got a new DCS starting next week. So I'm very keen again that we as a corporate body send a message out to the new DCS, and we'll be meeting and talking to her next week, that we're totally behind this piece of work and we want to do all we can as members to drive it forward. So yeah, my preference certainly for the first 12, 18 months would be that option B on recommendation 1 is probably where we focus our resources rather than trying to do too much too soon. But I think there's going to be lots of questions and conversations about broader governance of children's services matters over the next 12 months anyway.
Thank you very much, Joel. Councillor Marcus, please.
Yeah, I would support option B as well, just in terms of keeping focus and direction. Aware that when we, even if we do have best interests of everyone at heart and decide to widen the scope of the definition of corporate parenting, if you're taking on too much work and the actual core of the work will be weakened by that good intention. Financial, we have to, considering the last report, we have to talk about financial implications. So even though it is about culture, is all of this work included? At the moment, in the report, it says there are no financial implications. In Appendix A, it says there's a risk that financial and staffing constraints may hinder the adoption of corporate parenting efforts. Would you like to talk about that a little bit, please?
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think as far as additional financial support for this work, I think it's right, as I've said in the report, that there isn't an additional financial resource. There are challenges, as I'm sure the Vice Chair and Claire know about, in terms of continuity and sustainability of staffing. So I think that risk relates to that. The purpose of corporate parenting really is about a philosophy, so that everybody in this room and everybody on that board sees the children as their own. You know, what would you do if it was your child? How would you push for education? If there's employment, businesses would be part of this group. What can they do to give them some support? So it is around the philosophy, and the risk is more about sustainability of staffing in terms of resources, not purely financial.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll second the proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Nixon, please.
Thank you. I just wanted some clarification, please. Well, I don't disagree with narrowing the focus, ensuring we do focus on children in care, care experience, young people and vulnerable children. Just some clarity on how we identify who the vulnerable children are. Obviously, if they're in care, it's easier to identify. If they're carers, it's easy to identify. We just want to make sure that we don't miss out any vulnerable children, leave them behind.
I think it's really for the board to focus in on what we mean by vulnerable children at this stage. Conversations that I've had with the Vice Chair are around carers, children that in the education system, children who are open to children's social care or are referred but not quite make the threshold for that. Generally, again, as a community, who are the children that we think need the support? and what are the policies and processes and oversight that the board can have to provide that support.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Alongside the corporate parenting duties, it's important to stress that it's not just a council duty, it's a partnership duty. I think some of your partners have struggled to know how that works here on the island. So I think this will clarify some of that, and it will be a place where you can make sure as a council that you've got assurance that those vulnerable children, and there's work to be done on identifying what you mean by vulnerable, are getting and getting their needs met. I think it's also important that there's a virtual school head post on the island, which is still developing. On the mainland, any upper tier local authority has a duty to support any child with a social worker. They don't, you know, and that's quite a narrow definition on the mainland, because it's a great number of children, really. Here, you don't have that, if you like, number of children needing that kind of resource. So that's where you can really embrace that community spirit of corporate parenting to your vulnerable children. So you didn't have support available for any child that might present between 16 and 18 as homeless. You know, they would be vulnerable children. So that would be part of this board's role, to sort of see how that's, you know, if children are presenting, how that's developed. And the same Ofsted did pick up around your children who may be carers for adults in their family. So that's the kind of thing around vulnerability. It's not a safeguarding issue. You know, this is about the whole needs of the child. It's not just about children who may be on a child protection plan or at risk of harm. It's much broader than that. And I mean, children speak very, very clearly around, particularly children who've been in care and care leavers, just how having an important person in their lives can make such a difference to how they can develop, how they build relationships. And that's the ambition, isn't it, for you here, to have that kind of support available.
Thank you. Councillor White, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add my support to sort of recommendation B here. I think it'd be good to have that focus at the start, but also bearing in mind that when, you know, the Care Ready strategy and the corporate parenting board the ideas first came to council last year, it was noted that actually this would probably drive improvements in practice across the board, and therefore will actually drive improvements to services for children and young people across the islands already. But it'd be good to retain that in the background, the possibility of broadening it later. But I think to begin with, having that focus will make things clearer for people. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you wanting to come in?
Yeah, I was trying to work out whether to come in or not. Can you give me assurance that in the situation where we have to take a child into care at the moment, there are sufficient procedures and provisions in place for us to be able to do that and fulfil our corporate parenting requirements as we stand today?
I know you're looking at me. I'm not your, you know, I'm not an officer here, but in my role, providing assurance to the Secretary of State about how improvement work is happening on the islands. You do have an issue around sufficiency for foster carers in particular, and I know there's some considerable work going on with the regional initiative that's being built up around fostering. I think you have a very collaborative relationship with Cornwall, and that is being built on. At the moment, you don't have that sufficiency here, but there are ways you can manage that through Ofsted, and you know, there's lots of different ways of child being looked after by somebody else, either through kinship care or, you know, friends and relatives. So I do think I am assured that if a child had to come into being looked after, either accommodated voluntarily or, you know, through a care order, that you would find a solution here. But it's not as clear as it needs to be yet.
Yes.
Yes, so that's absolutely right. Thank you, Claire. I think as far as if a child came into care today, we would have the processes in place to take that child into care. Where they would go, I think, is what you were talking about in terms of sufficiency. So the team's been working on this on the 17th of March. There's an open day for foster carers, anybody who wants to know information about that. So that will be shared with people soon. And also we have a partnership with Cornwall for child protection work. So the people who are kind of the pushy parent, the independent reviewing officers, we buy that in from Cornwall. So if that child came into care today, we have the processes to take them into care. We would find somewhere, because that's what social workers do. And then there would be the independent reviewing officer whom we would buy in from Cornwall to make sure that that child is taken care of and they have a good, safe home.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. I have a proposer and a seconder for these recommendations, and that is proposing and seconding item B of recommendation 1. Is there any councillor who wishes to propose item A instead? Councillor Legg.
I don't wish to propose option A. I was wondering whether this is something that could be reviewed down the line. I don't know if we should set a timeline on that now, perhaps. Like revisit it in 12 months. Yeah.
Yep.
So do I need to add an amendment for that?
Yeah. Are you happy with that, monitoring officer, please?
I mean, I'll take the advice of the officers present presenting the report. I just wonder if 12 months is too soon, because you're still establishing the board, etc. And I wonder if 18 would be more purposeful for members, in that you will have had a longer period where you've embedded the corporate parenting to be able to actually undertake a meaningful review.
Yeah, 18 would be good for me.
Okay. Thank you very much then. So we have an amendment that we will be voting on B in recommendation 1, but that will be reviewed in 18 months' time. So all those in favour, please, of the two recommendations with option B in recommendation 1, reviewed in 18 months. Thank you.
Sorry, this could just be me, but who seconded those proposals?
Very good point, monitoring officer. Oh yes,
Thank you.
It was Councillor Marcus. Sorry, my memory had lost me. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that was unanimous. Yeah, thank you very much indeed. And thank you for the report. So we move on now to item 12 on our agenda, which is the Isles of Scilly Fire and Rescue Service Prevention Strategy in the hands of our Chief Fire Officer, Phil. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, members, good morning. I'm pleased to bring forward the Isles of Scilly Fire and Rescue Service Prevention Strategy. This strategy sets out how we will meet our duty to promote fire safety and to reduce our risks across the island. At its core, it focuses on helping people stay safe from fires and other emergencies through a targeted and intelligent-led approach. We're using local data, insight and strong partnership working to ensure our prevention activity reaches those who need it most, whether that's in the home, on our roads or within the island environment. The strategy also strengthens our community engagement with school visits, safety campaigns and closer dialogue with residents, so we can educate, support and respond to emerging risks effectively. We will measure our impact clearly using practical and realistic performance indicators and ongoing evaluation to make sure our interventions genuinely improve community safety. The strategy has been endorsed by the Scrutiny Committee and I now seek members' approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Phil. Any questions or comments? Councillor Mumford.
That's already been to scrutiny. I'd like to propose recommendation 1.
Thank you. Councillor Blackwell, please.
I'm happy to second.
Thank you. So we have a proposer and seconder for the 4 recommendations. All those in favour, please. That's unanimous. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for your report, Phil. Thank you. We move on now to item 13, which is our social housing account, the rent setting for 26-27, in the hands of Rachel. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. So this is our social housing rent setting, which we do annually, and at this time we are proposing to increase our social housing rents by 4.8%, which is CPI plus 1% in line with national policy.
Councillor Marcus, please.
I don't think we have any say in this, do we? So I propose a recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Nixon. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Rachel. So we move on to item 14, which is the general fund account rent setting for 26-27, also in your hands. Thank you.
That's okay. So our general fund rent setting report applies to all of our properties which are within our stock that we currently use for statutory officers, essential staffing need, and at times emergency housing. And these aren't set at social rent levels. These are more market rent levels, and we're proposing to increase this by CPI only, which in September, which is the date that we use for rent setting, was 3.8% across that. You will note there is a separate category there of category 1, and that's where we do have a social tenant in one of our general fund properties, which is an old historic tenancy, old secure tenancy. So that one is being suggested to increase in line with the social rents, but other than that, everything else we're suggesting to increase by CPI only at this time to cover increasing costs and repairs.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Councillor Mumford, please.
I was just wondering why the increase is different for general fund housing than it is for social housing.
So we have historically kept this one slightly differently because the general fund housing is already set much higher than our social rents. So should anything happen to any of the occupants within there and they were unable to work, we're just bridging that slight gap between the local housing allowance and making sure that they are still affordable for the people that we house within them.
Thank you. Councillor Sims, please.
I just wanted to make a sort of general point, really. The government tends to use CPI for fees and charges because CPI is higher than the RPI. Yet they use RPI to announce as the sort of baseline inflation rate, and it's just I don't know. I'm quite uncomfortable with it. However, it's nothing we can do about it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Marcus, please.
Yeah, are these rents, like social housing rents, are they collected for 50 weeks of the year for general fund properties?
Yes, so we operate all of our rent collection over a 50-week calendar year. So we get 2 weeks for rent-free over the Christmas and New Year period, where we don't upload any rent uploads at all.
Okay. On that basis, I would like to amend the proposal to include it for add a 1% increase on the CPI, please, to increase the amount we've got for repairs.
Okay, thank you. We'll come back to that proposal in a moment. Could I have Councillor Blackwell next, please?
Yeah, I'm just on the back of that, really. I've noticed that there is an option to actually do that. It's not a massive increase. And I think the argument for, I mean, just for the sake of fairness, it would be right, because we refer in the previous agenda item that 4.8% would be a small impact to those tenants, those 100 odd tenants. But here it's kind of like we don't want to do that because of the cost of living crisis. But obviously the previous tenants we've referred to, they have a cost of living crisis too, and we've just put them at 4.8. So for the sake of fairness, I would like to see CPI +1 on this one as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mumford, please.
I'd like to second Councillor Marcus's proposal for a 1% increase.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nixon, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to check, you've put in the affordability assessment, if rents become too expensive, then this will lead to increased rent arrears and voids. What full assessment was carried out? I mean, is there an actual risk that we would see this happening, or is it a possibility?
So, can I come in, Rachel? Because I think it is a point I was going to make anyway, is that we're already seeing rent arrears increase, so cost of living is hitting. I think there's a fundamental difference between social rents and general fund rents here. And if you look at the rent tables, you'll see that the general fund rents are almost twice the rate of social rents. So social rents in terms of affordability are much more affordable. They're generally 50% of market rate, whereas your general fund ones are much closer to the market rates, so almost double your social rent rate. So when you think about increasing costs on your rent levels, it becomes more challenging to keep it affordable if you go above the CPI rate for your general funds, because they're already above a lot of what we call affordability ratios. So I think it's important that members in coming to this decision understand the distinction between social rents, which are around about 50% of market rent, and general fund rents, which are already substantially higher and based towards the market rent level. So I think there is that difference already. So there is a price differential between the social rents and general fund rents that is quite significant. So if you look at a general fund rent for, say, a 2-bedroom property there, it's around about £200 a week, whereas your social rental properties will be about half that. So there is a fundamental difference in pricing between the general fund and social fund rents, which members ought to take into account in reaching this decision.
Thank you very much, Nicola. We will do. Councillor Blackwell, please.
Thank you. So Nicola, just coming back on what you said, that's true. I understand what you're saying. I'm just reading about general fund properties are there in order to provide accommodation for statutory officers and essential key workers. So generally speaking, those people in those 15 properties will have an income compared to potentially some of those people in the social fund properties may not, or maybe on benefits, or so that's something maybe else to consider. Thank you.
Nicola?
So, yeah, just to confirm that the social rents are covered by local housing allowance, so they're below what's called the local housing allowance. So if anybody were on credit or on low income, they would have some help towards their housing provision. The general fund rents are set above local housing fund levels, so are less affordable. In terms of who's in those properties, as you know, with adult social care pressures at the moment, we're seeing more and more people using our general fund properties or private rentals from our adult social care needs. So traditionally you'd have had your chief officers using general fund properties, but more recently we're seeing them being used by care workers and health workers who are obviously on lower incomes than the statutory officers.
Thank you. Councillor Peacock, please.
Yeah, I note from, so it doesn't actually say what table it is, section 25, on page, agenda pack page 126, and I think it's the page 6 of the document, the increase is less than £400 if we go up by 1% over the whole of the council estate. And I'm just wondering whether, I understand the concept behind why there should be the same increase. I just wonder if the amount of aggro we might get for this.
Can I
is worth
interrupt
it.
a minute? Councillor Marcus, could I just ask you whether you still want your proposal to go through in light of Nicholas Stinson's comment?
Yeah, I'm happy for it to go through. I think, I mean, it's only £1 or £1.50 or £2 tops on the most expensive property a week. I'm just aware that we are in real financial difficulties and everything counts at the moment. I understand the cost of living issues as well, but I'm afraid that we're going to have to make some difficult decisions, and this is one of them. So,
Okay.
Apologies that I have to leave, but
Okay.
yeah, I'm still.
Thank you. We'll deal with it. Thank you.
Can I just say, obviously, he can't propose and then not vote on the item. So somebody else would then need,
Yeah,
you know, if
we're
Councillor
going to-
Marcus is now leaving the room.
Yeah, well, we'll do that when Councillor Peacock's finished. Thank you very much. Councillor Peacock.
Yeah, so, sorry, so the point I was making was it's £400 over the estate. Or is it worth the amount of aggravation we might get from those tenants to do it now with no warning? Or are we content around the table that we do it, bearing in mind Councillor Marcus's point that it's only a couple of pounds on their rent a week?
Okay, thank you. Right, well, we need to consider, please, members, that proposal that we increase by 1%, making it 4.8 instead of 3.8. Do I have a new proposer for that?
I'll propose that. Okay.
Okay, is there a seconder for that proposal, please?
Second
Councillor
that.
Blackwell. Does anyone else have any proposal to make? Councillor Sims?
I'm not happy with the new proposal. However, I think I'm in quite a small minority here. I don't wish to make any other proposal, but I will vote for it, but I have reservations.
Okay, thank you. So we have a proposer and a seconder that the recommendation will be amended to 4.8% in total. All those in favour of that recommendation, please. That's carried. Anybody against? Councillor Peacock. Any abstentions? No, so that's carried. Thank you very much, Rachel, for your report. So that brings us to the close of our meeting. Thank you very much. The meeting is now closed.